What's up, everybody? Demon back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be talking about The Walking Dead Season 7, Episode 10. This one's titled New Best Friend. This is going to be doing our review slash breakdown. Spoiler warning, of course. And let's get into the episode. So the episode opens, we're in the middle of a drop-off with the Kingdom and the Saviors. One of our main Savior girls, Kingdom girls, one of our main Kingdom girls says that one of the walkers coming over is wearing the same dress as her sister used to, and her sister used to like that dress. She has a human connection to it, which is why one of the Kingdom people tells her to stop and not think about it. What's really cool to note here is the fact that she's using a bow and arrow and she shoots him straight in the face, meaning she has some practice with it and she's pretty good with it. As we're going to see towards the middle of the episode, as we're going to see here in a few minutes, the Kingdom is well stocked with a bunch of bow and arrows. Also, we saw that last episode during that whole training sequence when Ezekiel was explaining to Rick that they can't join the fight. The Saviors roll up, and of course, they start trouble. Jared, this dude from last season, or last half season, starts to pick a fight with Richard again, saying that he shouldn't have his gun anymore. He wants to take his gun. Then Richard says, you hit me first. The guy pulls his gun, and everyone goes into another standoff mode. Very similar to what happened last half season with the same characters. Notice how Richard's face here is covered in blood after he took a couple beatings for the team, pretty much. That will come full circle here in this episode. Ezekiel tries to keep the peace with the Saviors. He tells Richard to put his weapon away. Jared, on the other hand, he doesn't really care about the peace. He goes to pistol whip and potentially kill Richard. So Jared goes to pistol whip Richard, and Morgan, quick with the staff, knocks the gun out of his hand, knocks his hand away. Pretty soon Morgan's staff is confiscated from him. Benjamin steps into action here, swings up his staff, winds up knocking Morgan in the head, and also taking down Jared the Savior. So this comes late. They talk about this later, how Benjamin is getting a lot quicker with the staff, yet he's still quite reckless with it. Also, pay attention to the fact that this main Savior dude here says that Richard is first. He is still first in the lineup for batting, which is an obvious reference to Negan lining people up and beating their heads in with a baseball bat. He says, I know it's not his fault, but this has got to stop. Morgan asks for his staff back, and they refuse to give it to him. Of course, this staff is very special to him because it was given to him by Eastman, someone who he cared about, who died. Now, this is where we have that little confrontation with Benjamin, where Ezekiel basically says, you were too quick with the staff, you know how to fight, doesn't mean you should. Daryl comes out questioning what's going on. Daryl and Morgan have an interesting conversation about Carol. Daryl saying that if Carol knew what was going on, she'd be leading everyone to war right now, and Morgan says that's why she left. Once again, another thing that will come full circle by the end of the episode. Here, Richard is shooting bow and arrows, and he's saying he's training for his confrontations with the Saviors in the future. He knows that they won't let him have guns anymore, so he's got to move to something else. So he picks bow and arrow. He gives Daryl the third crossbow Daryl's had throughout the series. The first one he had, I think he lost in like season 3 or 4. He got a new one, and then he got a new one right here is his third one. I don't quite remember what happened to the first one off the top of my head, but I know he lost his first one, wound up with the second one. Dwight still has his second one, and now Daryl has a third one. So now this is just a kind of cool thing here. This is what I was talking about with them having lots of archery and bow and arrows and everything like that. So Richard is putting into act this plan that Daryl agrees at first to help him with before he fully realizes what it is. It is going to be Richard hitting someone that Ezekiel loves in an indirect way to get Ezekiel to step into action with Alexandria against the Saviors. Pretty much Richard's plan is to kill a whole bunch of the Saviors, lead them back to Carol, and then they'll kill Carol. This is all explained when Richard and Daryl park themselves in front of this truck. We'll be talking about what the truck represents and what it is here in a second. This is when they explain it to Daryl. Daryl has his reservations about what's going on. Now, Richard explains that, yes, this is the girl Carol. I hoped you didn't know her. Daryl tries to leave, but Richard basically says, I'm going to do this with or without you. Now, people turned against Richard really fast here because everyone really likes Carol. She's a fan favorite. Let me explain to you why you should not be mad at Richard. Is because he doesn't know who Carol is. He has no idea who she is. All he knows is that she showed up at the kingdom injured, wanting to die. She didn't want to stay with anyone. She ran off to live in this house all by herself so she could essentially die alone in peace. And so he's pretty much thinking, oh, you know what, this girl, she's kind of worthless. Yeah, I can tell she's got balls, as he says. He goes, I can kind of tell she's got balls. She's very gutsy. She's a very strong person. She may even make it out of this interaction with the Saviors, but we need the Saviors to attack her at the very least. We need, and she wants to die anyway, so who's it going to hurt? We need Ezekiel to realize that he needs to step in action to protect her, to protect the kingdom, and to fight the Saviors. So he's not the bad guy here. Richard just doesn't know who Carol is and what she can do. And also, Carol just won't do it. By the end of the episode, no one will even tell her. Daryl won't even tell her about what's going on in the hopes that she won't join the war. So then Richard tries to kill these Saviors still. Daryl stops him. They get into a little bit of a fist fight here. Richard saying, the Saviors, Richard saying, if you want your people to move against the Saviors, you need the kingdom to do it, and the only way to get the kingdom is to get Carol to get Ezekiel. So that's pretty much what he says. Now, the thing about this truck that they're standing in front of, that they're having this fight in front of, going back to the theme of rebels that we were talking about last episode, if you remember, we were talking about in our breakdown, the fact that there was a lot of historical rebels that were being brought up. Now, here's a little bit of a different type of rebel from the movie Smokey and the Bandit. The truck they're in front of is the truck from Smokey and the Bandit. Now, the interesting thing about this is the fact that in the movie Smokey and the Bandit, of course, you are rooting for the bandit. He is a rebel. He is an outlaw. He is doing things against the system the same way that Alexandria, the kingdom, and the hilltop are going to have to start doing things against the system here. In this picture, you have one force against this massive army, and that's what's represented on the truck, is a standoff between a one horseman and a bigger set of things. Now, in the picture, it's not necessarily representing a standoff, it's more representing kind of robbery, pretty much. But this whole idea of one force opposing a larger force and most likely coming out on top, as we're going to see here in this picture, obviously this cowboy is going to take on these settlers and win, which is representing Rick standing against the full army of the Saviors. Daryl basically lays down the law, saying no matter what, if anything happens to Carol, doesn't matter how it happens, if anything happens, he's going to kill Richard. Kind of similar to Rick saying to Father Gabriel, if what you're hiding somehow hurts these people in any way, I'll kill you. Cutting to the Junkyard Group. This is the really interesting stuff of the episode. This is where things get good. So cutting to the Junkyard Group, we just see some of their scraps everywhere. We see a little bit of their organized system here. Very organized group, actually. They don't even speak a word this whole sequence. They just go into formation without even needing anything in command. So one thing that I really love here is the shot of just Rick and everyone blending in with these massive, it's kind of like it's a big group of people, very tall people as well in there. All of them are uniform, wearing black. Rick and his crew kind of blend in with there, just kind of showing the facelessness of everyone and just kind of how they have to fit into this situation. They're going to have to fit in with these people in order to get these people to help them out. So this girl comes up. Rick, I love how he's so confident. Hi, I'm Rick. So this girl says, we own your lives. You want to buy them back. And then Rick says, we need to see Gabriel. We need to see he's alright. She brings Gabriel out. She says they were going to Alexandria to get the supplies from the boat that they saw. They didn't find them, so they just took everything else. Rick says, he says, we can't buy our lives back because we don't own our lives. The Saviors do, and they'll kill you. Or you could join us and fight them, and then they won't own anyone's lives, and it'll be good for everyone. So here, this girl says no. Then Gabriel pretty much steps up. He takes a knife, holds it to this girl, Tamil, holds it to her neck, saying, you got to join us, this group. We can do anything. We'll show you how much we can do. Rick can do anything. He's kind of Rick's hype man through the episode, which is pretty great. So then this chick says, show Rick the up, up, up. I guess that's their little term for up on top of this trash packed. Then it's Rosita, actually, who has the line for the episode title, New Best Friends, I guess. So this is the episode title, New Best Friend, referring to Rick's future relationship with this new trash group. I guess they're called, I don't quite remember what they were called from Talking Dead or anything like that. Just the internet seems to call them the Garbage Pail Kids, and I kind of like that term as well. So I'm going to say Rick and the Garbage Pail Kids, Alexandria and them, they're going to have this nice relationship that's going to continue, and I don't think it'll continue. I really don't think this group can be trusted. I think once they get the guns by whenever they get the guns that Rick's trying to get them, I think they'll turn against them, and I think it'll be a mini fight amongst the all-out war. Anyways, they go up to the up, which also this new garbage group, they have this weird way of talking where they just talk. They say like they have this main chick especially, they just have a weird way of saying things. They almost talk like they're not from our time. So it just shows how awkward and secluded they are. The fact that they don't even speak proper English and everything like that. It's supposed to be very off-putting intentionally. So this girl up here with Rick, she's basically explaining, yeah, we realize things are changing. We used to just be scavengers, but now guess what? We can't really scavenge all that much, so we're going to have to start diving into something else. She basically says, show us where your loyalty lies. Show us if you're able to fight for us, if you're able to fight with us, if you're able to prove your worth. She pushes Rick down into this fight pit, creating the best scene of the episode, which is Rick versus this massive, it's a very big walker, very armored walker, these big spikes sticking out of him. Michonne's freaking out looking through this tunnel. It's like a big pipe that just leads from one end of this trash pile to the other end, and she can see little glimpses of Rick fighting this walker. So this big huge this armored walker just comes down on Rick. He's freaking out once he kicks this skull and this bones of someone else that this walker ate. Then he starts freaking out. He's pushed into a wall. So the concept art for this walker is really cool. They did a lot of concept art for it that Greg Nicotero was showing on Instagram. It shows how deadly this guy is. He has spikes all through his legs, all through his body, all through his arms. It's pretty much like if he reaches for you, you're pretty much bound to get stabbed. If you go to fight him, you're going to get stabbed. You're going to die. His helmet is made of metal, and it's got spikes all over it so that you can't hit his head. You cannot kill him like that. Of course, we don't know how Rick kills him because, Walking Dead is censoring their gore now, which is pretty stupid. But we don't know how Rick kills this guy. Probably just stabs him up through the jaw here in a minute. Anyways, when this big huge walker comes down on Rick, he's freaking out. So he's trying to push it back. He's trying to push its head back so it doesn't bite him. One of the blades on its head goes right through his hand, pushes him against a wall. He's still freaking out. So, of course, this huge hand injury, it's going to have to affect him somehow. I mean, you don't just walk away from that, alright? Like, he tries to at the end of the episode, and, he's doing fine as of now. This cut, it might get infected. I don't quite know what's going to happen to it, but something bad is going to happen to it because you don't walk away from something like this very easily. Also, just how much trauma Rick's hand's been through, as we'll talk about here in a minute. They gotta do something with this hand. Now, the idea of a hand loss has been something throughout the whole season that's been very prominent. We've seen Negan torturing Rick, making him almost cut off Carl's hand. We've seen other victims' hands that were cut off by Negan, tied up to this statue outside the sanctuary. We've seen Negan making jokes to it about Carl and about Daryl, about having their hands cut off. We see Simon telling Rick he's going to have to keep that hatchet handy if Daryl turns up. Negan telling Rick that he's going to have to cut pieces off of Daryl if he turns up. So this idea of lost limbs, especially hands, is very prominent throughout the season. Obvious comic book reference to when Rick loses his hand, although I think at this point it's verging on foreshadowing. It's not just references anymore. It's not just Easter eggs. It is foreshadowing the loss of Rick's hand. Now, Rick obviously in the comic loses his hand, and after the All-Out War story arc, he has a slight replacement for it. It's this mechanical thing, but overall, Rick's character is really shaped by the loss of his hand, and that is one thing that's very important to his development that they're going to have to bring into the show at some point or another. So, obviously, there's a lot more comic book references in this episode with the fact that Rick kicks this walker, slitting open his leg, which means he winds up with both a huge hand injury and a huge leg injury, the same way that Rick in the comic is a huge hand injury in the form of a missing hand, a huge leg injury in the form of a bum leg, which Negan actually cracks in half. So Rick is just, in the show, already they're kind of alluding to what his future is going to wind up as in the comic series. I got this picture from Mikapath Presents. If you don't know who that is, then I don't know why you're here. Go check him out. He's a much better Walking Dead YouTuber than I am. Very good Walking Dead YouTuber. So thanks to him, I stole this picture from him. I didn't ask. I'm sorry about that, but I stole this picture from him. And yeah, so he's the one who pointed it out. Credit to him. I guess I'll leave a link down below so you guys can go check that out. Now, once again, like I was saying, Rick's hand is lost in the comic, and this is something that's brought up in this episode with the hand injury, but also, I feel like in The Walking Dead show, more often than not, Rick's hand is injured in some way, shape, or form. Like I said, at this point, I feel like it's got to be more than just foreshadowing. I feel like it's got to be more than just alluding to things or just references and Easter eggs. At this point, it's got to be foreshadowing the same way that they were setting Glenn's death up a really long time before it happened, all the way as far back as season 5 that they were setting up Glenn's death, maybe even further that they were setting up his death with Lucille, especially with this whole season 6 with him seeing all these heads bashed in. So I feel like, if they're going to set Glenn's death up that much, they're going to foreshadow it that much, I guess they could do the same with Rick's hand and it would work the same way. So Rick's fight with Winslow continues. He pulls this walker off his hand, falls back over after he slits his leg open. He stands up. Michonne's yelling at him, use the wall. Eventually he does. He starts pulling trash off the wall, pretty much creating a landslide of trash garbage that falls all over this Winslow, the walker. Then he picks up this shard of glass, goes to kill it, and we don't see how he kills it because they're toning down the gore, so of course they can't show a walker kill anymore, and they have to cut away from that, which is honestly, it's ridiculous, and I don't know why you would make it through 7 seasons of this show and then complain about the gore is ridiculous. Glenn and Abraham's death is not even the most gory thing seen in the show. I would argue that Noah's death is worse. I would argue that there's so many other worse deaths throughout this series, and it's just because that there was a big emotional connection to Glenn and Abraham that people walked away from that saying, oh man, that was terrible, that was so bad, whereas we've seen so much worse throughout this series. And it's just the fact that we like these characters that people start to complain, and they make it such a big deal that they have to cut away from these walker kills. They may not have ever filmed it. They may have always intended for it to be off screen. But we also know from interviews with the person who plays Fat Joey that they did tone his death down, guaranteed. He says there's extra shots that I would have loved to seen of my head getting beat in. But guess what? They didn't make it to the show. And then we had Gale Ann Hurd saying, you know what? We did tone down the violence. Just because we had Gimple and Nicotero saying, no, we didn't, and we're not gonna. I don't necessarily believe them. I think maybe the Blu-rays won't. But I feel like this season, certainly on TV, it definitely has some cutout stuff. Rick basically snaps at these people, these junkyard people, saying, believe us now, just tell us what you want, we'll go get it. She says, we want guns, a lot. And then she says, and then we'll fight your fight. So now I guess their mission is to get this junkyard community lots of guns. Rick smiles, knowing that they're probably going to be able to do it, so he made this deal with them. This green screen in the background, everyone's complaining about. Personally, I'm very confused as to what it is, because on the one hand, yeah, Rick's head pops so much on this background that it's gotta be a green screen. On the other hand, if it was a green screen, how did this airplane make it in the background? Now, you could be thinking, oh, wait a minute, that's not an airplane, that's a bird. I don't know why you said that was an airplane. Well, it's obviously it can't be a bird when you watch the episode. It moves way too quick. Also, it seems to have some sort of trail to it. I don't think that's a bird. It could be. I mean, it could be a bird, but it looks like an airplane. It could be intentional. They could have intentionally put that airplane there. Or this was actually them just on top of this trash heap. An airplane flew past in the background, and it made it into the final shot. The only reason that the background behind Rick looked so bad in the episode was because they had to put CGI trash piles everywhere, which kind of mucked everything up and made it all look very fake. So Jadis asks Rick if he's confident that they'll win this fight with the Saviors. He says he will. She says, we're taking back. And then he says, we're going to take back what you stole from us. She says, basically, and then Rick says, we're going to take back what you stole from us, and once we beat the Saviors, you're entitled to some of their stuff. She wants half of their stuff. Rick tells her she's going to earn a third of their stuff, of the Saviors' stuff. Eventually, she kind of agrees to it and says they're going to keep some of the stuff that they took or something. I couldn't quite understand what she made the deal with because she talks in such a weird way that I didn't quite understand what the deal they made was. But they do eventually come to a deal. They shake hands on it. And she says we waited a long time by that boat, and she wants something for it. Then she explains to Rick that that walker in the pit's name was Winslow. Rick asks her name. She says it's Jadis. The junkyard community, they throw down the weapons and then they walk out of that area. Rick comes out, he's smiling for some reason. I mean, he's very injured and they're going to have to do something about that, but he walks out smiling. Michonne and everyone seem all happy that he made it out of there. This whole shot of the weapons being thrown on the floor and then this big group who is just opposing the group getting out of there, very similar to the way Negan left everyone at the end of season 7 episode 1. However, the context is flipped here. Instead of an opposing group leaving this group after some massive loss, this time there's a large gain, and then this friendly group leaves our group, leaving their weapons on the floor. It's kind of an interesting parallel. So, King Ezekiel shows up at Carol's cabin. He's just kind of there to say hi, pretty much, check on her, gives her some cobbler, and then they head out. Carol thinks that they come back to the door. When she opens it up, it turns out to be Daryl. She has a little reuniting with him. Their hug here parallels their hug back in Season 5 after Terminus. Then Daryl asks her, why'd you go? She says she had to. Cutting back to Rick at the junkyard group. We find out what happened to Gabriel. He heard something when he was on guard duty. He goes down to check on what it was and was kidnapped by this girl who was looking for the supplies from the boat. Then he says, what made you smile? Rick says, someone showed me that enemies can become friends. Now, first of all, we called it in our breakdown for last episode that's what happened to Gabriel. He went to the pantry, got jumped, and then he had to steal all this stuff and he was kidnapped. Also, notice the fact that Rick says someone showed me enemies can become friends, because if you remember, back in Season 5 and the beginning of Season 6, Father Gabriel and Rick didn't really have all that great of a relationship. Gabriel trying to get Rick kicked out of Alexandria, and then in Season 6, Rick just all around hating Gabriel up until No Way Out. So I really like that here. I like their friendship now and their parallels between that. Also, the term new best friend could be referring to Rick and Gabriel's relationship. Rosita, being the little biatch she's been this season, wants to leave everyone who's hurt. She just wants to head out on her own, find these guns, steal them, get this group on their side so they can kill the saviors. I don't know what they're doing with Rosita's story, but I really don't like Rosita in this season, so I hope they fix it because she is annoying me so much. Rick asks Tara that because she's been out further than anyone, could she show them where not to look? She says yes, and I think what she needs to do is be like, alright, you can look here, well, you can't look here, 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 and here, and basically just say, you can't look anywhere but lead them straight to the ocean side, and then she should say, like, be on your guard, there is deadly raiders there who will shoot on sight, so then Rick proceeds with caution, no one gets killed. That way they can go check out this oceanside group, and she can keep her promise to Cindy. Rick takes this little cat that we saw at the start of the episode, this, I don't know what it's made of, like wicker cat or whatever. He takes it to Michonne. She asks, why are you getting that? And then he says, to replace the one you lost. This is a reference to back in Season 3 when she goes back in that little house for Carl to get the picture of Lori, as well as to grab that one random cat that she really seemed to like. Carol and Daryl have a nice little dinner by the fireside. She's very worried. She basically explains, if anyone got hurt by the Saviors while I was gone, I'm gonna go to war with you, but there won't be any of my humanity left. I'll be nothing, and I might as well be dead after that war. Daryl, in an effort to protect her, explains that no one got hurt, keeping the truth from her about Glenn, Abraham, himself, Olivia, Spencer, and Eugene, in order to protect her and keep her humanity intact. It is just kind of sparing her from the harsh truth. A lot of people don't understand why Daryl made that decision. I don't understand why they don't understand why he made that decision. He was trying to save her, so of course he was going to have to lie to her. And it's not really a lie if it's to protect her. It's just trying to protect her. Daryl heads out, giving one last hug to Carol, so a lot of people are thinking, oh my god, this Daryl-Carol relationship, I can't believe they're finally getting into it. Oh, Daryl and Carol, they need to be together. I don't think that's what's going on here at all. I think this is just kind of like a, I don't know what kind of bond they have. Just it's a mutual I think it's more out of, it's definitely not out of a romantic place of heart for sure. It's just mostly out of like a place of mutual admiration and respect and love for each other because they have been through a lot together. It's more of in the sense of a family than in any romantic sense. Here's a really cool parallel with Daryl staring into the cage looking at Shiva. This is of course paralleling Daryl being in a cage himself. So it's Daryl staring at a caged animal when earlier in the season he was the caged animal. Also, Daryl being so animalistic, I'm sure he feels a very strong connection with Shiva. Now, the best thing about this is Negan's line when he points the bat right at Daryl during Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo is catch a tiger by the toe, possibly alluding to the fact that Daryl will be caught at the kingdom near Shiva, something along the lines of that, or he'll be caught after this interaction with Shiva, which is, the tiger that he'll be getting caught by. So I think that's a really cool thing if that's the kind of parallel they're setting up here, or that's the kind of foreshadowing they were setting up, having that line land on Daryl. I don't think this is quite what's going to happen because Daryl leaves Kingdom at the end of this episode, as well as the fact that we know next episode is going to be all about Dwight trying to find Daryl and get him back to the sanctuary so that he doesn't die. We don't quite know what next episode is going to be about, but from the trailers, that seems to be what it's going to be. Daryl and Morgan have a little conversation here. Morgan saying, me and you are the same. We both try to protect Carol, and, so we are the same. We're hanging on to something after all. Daryl basically says, please just try and get the kingdom on our side. We need the kingdom. You gotta help us out here. Morgan says he can't, or at least, at the very least, it can't be from him that they get the answers they're looking for. The episode ends with Morgan and Richard staring at each other. Both of them have had negative interactions with Daryl recently. And also, they're kind of on opposite sides of the field here because although they are both people of the kingdom, both people who Ezekiel respects and will listen to, the thing is that Richard is against the Saviors, Morgan is for the peace with the Saviors, not that he's with the Saviors, but he's for the peace with them, so they kind of land on opposite sides of that, being that both the devil and the angel on Ezekiel's shoulder. Daryl heads out of the kingdom here, and he heads off into the distance to go to the hilltop where he possibly will get caught. I don't know if he'll ever get caught, but if he does, it's most likely going to be at the hilltop. Also, the hilltop is kind of in a really bad situation here, considering the fact that if Negan shows up to the hilltop, not only will he find Maggie, who he was told died, as well as Daryl, who he's trying to find and kill. So it's very, very risky for Daryl to go to the hilltop, and I don't really know how this is all going to play out from here. Pretty decent episode overall. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I think I raised it up from an 8 out of 10. I did like this episode quite a bit. I think it really does do better the more you watch it because there is a lot you can pick up from it, as well as the fact that although I thought it was kind of unmemorable during my reaction review, it turns out that I was remembering everything. It's just one of those episodes where even though it seems like a lot happened, not a lot actually happened when you really look at it. All that really happens is that Rick fights Winslow, gets the Junkyard group on his side, Daryl reunites with Carol and leaves the kingdom. And that is honestly all that happens in the episode if you really break it down. So it's kind of interesting that, I did think it was unmemorable. It turns out it's pretty memorable because not a lot happens. So you're going to remember what does happen. So overall, guys, I hope you all learned something. I can't really talk today. I don't know why. I'm just stumbling over my words all night. So this recording is going to have to be heavily edited because I'm really messing up what I'm saying here tonight. So if it kind of seems sloppy or whatever, I really tried to make it good. But for whatever reason, I'm just not having a good time talking or doing this reaction review. So hopefully next video will be a lot better and it'll be a lot more organized. Maybe I'll be able to talk a little bit more. I don't quite know. I just probably should get some sleep. So thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. D-Man.